Hey, welcome to UFO Buster Radio. This is episode number 81. And I am Manny Moonraker. And I'm here to chat with you today, just for a little bit. Now, initially, this episode was not supposed to happen today. I was actually supposed to be at the Aurora Alien Encounter, which was supposed to happen today. It's the UFO Conference, second annual event for Aurora. And the actual event was moved to September. But I figured, why not still talk about Aurora just a little bit? I'm not exactly an expert. I just looked the stuff up. But I wanted to share that with you guys. And we'll follow up again in September when the event actually happens. Now, this event was going to mark the 120th anniversary of the Aurora Alien event in Aurora, Texas, which occurred on April 17th, 1897, around 6 o'clock in the morning. Why stuff has to happen when it's so inconvenient? So let's jump right in it. Then we'll talk about some other stuff. And this week, we're going to dump MUFON because I was on there and I couldn't find anything that was worth talking about. There was some really crazy reports without any evidence. So I decided to go to the National UFO Reporting Center, or NUFORC. So we got a NUFORC report for you guys today. And I did some post-analysis, and there's something fascinating about this report, but we'll talk about that in a moment. First, let's get to 1897 Aurora. So the Aurora event happened back in 1897, April 17th. And like I said, it was at 6 o'clock in the morning. Now, this occurred on a property belonging to a Judge Proctor. And apparently this UFO came in pretty slow. It wasn't like burning hot, but it crashed into this individual's windmill. Now, this account was actually reported by someone that goes by the name of S.E. Hayden. Now, S.E. Hayden actually reported this incident to the Dallas Morning News, which incidentally, the Dallas Morning News is still around today. Now, if you look on the internet, you'll actually be able to see the report, the little news clipping from the Dallas Morning News. And just so that you don't have to search, I've included two of the clippings in the description of this podcast. So you can take a look at it, take a click, read, and see exactly what it was that S.E. Hayden reported in his Aurora Alien airship thingy windmill destroying event. So some of the descriptions that were actually floating around at that time was that this was a cigar-shaped UFO, metallic silver in color, appeared suddenly in the Aurora sky, and it was moving south to north. And apparently, unlike many of the balloon airships that were being used at the time, or kind of more like experimented with. Now, of course, just like in Roswell, this particular ship was built of an unknown metal material resembling aluminum and silver. A witness reported that this particular ship weighed in at about several tons. So now the report in Aurora came in at a time where there were a lot of reports of mysterious airships in the United States and actually around the world, believe it or not. But we'll get to that in a moment because there's some other reports that happened before and after Aurora. Now, going back to Hayden's report, he stated in his report that the townspeople watched in amazement as a slow-moving airship drifted over the town. Now, again, you gotta look at the words that he's using. He said drifted, so it didn't seem like it was in a rush to get anywhere. Now, they did say that the people that actually witnessed this Aurora UFO said that it appeared to have some kind of mechanical problems, and therefore they're assuming that that's why it collided with the windmill on Judge Proctor's property. So there are other reports that say there were maybe more than one occupant of this UFO. However, the stories, most of them come down to just being one, which was badly disfigured from the accident. And the stories go that the people decided that this weird creature, because they did not say it looked human, that this weird creature was actually buried in the Aurora City Cemetery. Now, apparently at one time, this particular place where this alien being from another planet was apparently marked at one time, but that stone was removed. And the owners of the property refused to allow anyone to excavate the area, basically to look for the body and recover it for testing or whatever reason, or just to prove that there was an alien body recovered at Aurora in 1897. As a matter of fact, you may have seen the episode of UFO Hunters, which was on the History Channel in 2008, where they actually attempted to get permission to go to the cemetery and do their own little research, but the cemetery owner would not allow them to conduct any research of the grave at all. So this led to a lot of people thinking that maybe this was really a trumped up story, that this really never really happened. And there was at one point where an individual stated that Hayden reported that particular news article to the Dallas Morning News, and it was a fake, that he actually admitted there was a fake, and that there were reports that there was no such windmill or a crash for that matter on the property of Judge Proctor. However, during that episode of UFO Hunters, they did find evidence that there was a windmill, not exactly the one that was described in many of the images that you might see associated with Aurora, but there was a windmill on the property at one time. So last year, when I attended the Aurora Alien Encounter, there was a presentation by Jim Marrs, and I actually had no idea until I started to do some research on the Aurora Alien situation, was that I realized that the reason why Jim Marrs was there was because Jim Marrs actually interviewed one of the witnesses that was around when the crash happened. Now, according to that interview, the eyewitness who actually saw the UFO crash stated that the windmill that was on Judge Proctor's property was really a 3-story wooden water pump. And this is what you see actually when you look at the UFO Hunter special back in 2008. So it's an amazing story, but it gives you that notion that UFOs have been around for a long time, even back when people were just hanging out in hot air balloons and blimps. And those were the main mode of transportation. And really in the 1890s, it was more like an experiment, really, because, you know, the Hindenburg and all that kind of stuff didn't come till later. So here's an interesting fact about airships way back in the day. In 1852, Henry Giffard built the first powered airship, and it consisted of a 143-foot-long cigar-shaped gas-filled bag with a propeller, and it was powered by a 3-horsepower steam engine. It wasn't into the 1900s that Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin of Germany invented the first rigid airship. So if you look at the timeline there, we know that there were things up in the air way before what came down in Aurora. So it almost kind of gives you the idea that maybe someone in the States was trying to get their own airship up in the sky. You know, it's the airship race. Kind of like the space race. And so that kind of brings me to the airships and the crazy reports that were coming out in the 1890s in the U.S. And most of those reports were coming from initially from the West Coast and heading east, if you will. So one of the first ones reported was out of Sacramento, California on November 18, 1896. Closer to the Aurora event, April 10, 1897, which was reported in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And apparently, this particular craft was actually about 20 feet in length and about 8 inches diameter, and it was reported out of the outskirts of Springfield, Missouri. shortly after that, there was another report out of Leroy, Kansas. This was on April 19th, 1897. And it was reported to the Yates Center Farmer Advocate on the 23rd, and apparently Alexander Hamilton and his son, an attendant, witnessed the airship hovering over the cattle pen. So there's no doubt here that there was a lot of stuff flying around in the west to the mid of the U.S. But that brings us to the idea that the story itself might have been a hoax. But not a hoax to scare people off or to, someone just sat around and say, hey, let's just make this aliens. Apparently, according to Barbara Brammer, who was a former mayor of Aurora, she stated in her research that the crash was done as a publicity stunt to bring people back to the city of Aurora. So some of the things that she cited was that the city of Aurora had a cotton crop which was destroyed due to the boll weevil infestation. The second issue, she says that there was a fire which claimed several buildings and several lives at that time. And then shortly after, there was a spotted fever epidemic in the town, which kind of decimated the citizens and had the town pretty much under quarantine. And then the last thing that she cited was that a planned railroad was never built, and so it never made it to the town. And so basically the town was falling apart, and the mayor at the time decided to go with Hayden's alien crash story in order to bring attention to the town, which was pretty much slowly dying out. So no matter which angle you take, it's a fascinating story, and it tells you that we have here in the United States and around the world a long history of UFO reports, people claiming that these are hoaxes, and conspiracy theories that just come out of the yin-yang, right out of the woodwork. That is a little history in Aurora. Like I said, I have a couple of links. I have the links in there for the newspaper articles that appeared in the Dallas Morning News back in 1897, and we'll see. Now, one thing I've got to add is that, you take every story with, a little bit of skepticism, and let that skepticism drive you to research and read a little more. But like Aurora, like all the other ancient old UFO encounters or reports, 1897, this thing is way too old to make anything of it, unless the city of Aurora decides to let people go in and dig up that cemetery to look for the actual evidence. And even then, what are you going to find? 120 years ago, there's probably nothing left, right? Not a single shred of evidence is probably left because Mother Nature has probably just recycled it. So we go on. That's Aurora for you. So listen, stay in touch with the podcast through Facebook, Manny Moonraker Facebook page, the UFO Buster Radio Facebook page, Instagram, and also on Twitter. On Monday, I'm going to send out the question to find out what it is that you guys want me to cover on the midweek episode. Don't forget, my midweek is Thursday, not Wednesday. And we'll get that out there and record it and do some research, and let's see what you got. Respond to my social media prompts, and I'll get to work on it just for y'all. Okay, so let's go to the NUFORC report. So the report is out of Alabama, a town of Newton, and it happened April 19th at 23:55, which is 11:55 p.m. Like I said earlier, these things happen at the worst times. So this report actually includes two witnesses, and they witnessed a triangular-shaped craft. Now, according to them, this craft has 7 white lights on its leading edge, and it passed overhead silently at a very high speed. So they both estimated the size from their vantage point. So they said that it was larger than that of the full moon. And basically, you know how far the moon is, where they're at, yada yada. It doesn't tell me anything. But anyway, there you go. So let's take a look at the first witness's report. So according to this individual, it really was a TR-3B shape. It was silent, triangular, and according to them, they walked outside in order to catch a glimpse of the passing asteroid, which I guess was reported in social media. But when they walked outside in front of their property and they could see the full sky without any trees interrupting, the witness number 2 exclaimed, "Look up, there's a UFO." When they looked up, what they saw was a triangular shaped craft, and the lights looked like they were in the shape of flying birds in the V formation. So they said the craft was very large and very fast moving. From where they stood, within 5 seconds the ship disappeared approximately 90 degrees, that is from where I was standing, and lost sight of the craft. Like I said, I read this just the way they reported, but that's what it says. Within 5 seconds the ship disappears approximately 90 degrees, that is from where I was standing to where I lost sight of the craft. So in other words, it was moving pretty damn fast. That might have been an easier way to say it. So now in the report also, the individual says that the craft was going south and headed towards Marianna, Florida. So this is getting close to the panhandle of Florida. And you guys who have been into things like, as mentioned before, things like UFO Hunters and all those UFO shows, you know there's always this thing about the panhandle of Florida being host to a lot of UFO activity. But I found something fascinating about this report, so I decided to do some research, because they gave us basically what direction this TR-3B was heading. In my research, what I found is that north of where they were in Newton, Alabama, is Tyndall Air Force Base. And southwest of Marianna, Florida, is Maxwell Air Force Base. So is this a coincidence that we have 2 Air Force bases? Is this the start and the end point of this aircraft? You know, we say it time and time again, this TR-3B really seems to be a man-made craft. And here you got a sighting that's in between 2 different United States Air Force bases. Maybe it's me, but that's too much of a coincidence. If I was from 4.2 far, I don't think I'd be hanging around Air Force bases, much less flying in their path. I've got the report for you. Check it out. Click on the links. I've got both links for the 2 reports from these witnesses, and I've got a link to the sketch. And I invite you to just look at the path on Google, because that's exactly what I did. I went to Google Maps. I mapped the directions from where they saw it to where they said it was heading. And then I looked for Air Force bases. Elementary, my dear Watson. Elementary. So this has been episode 81, and it's a little short. Unfortunately, like I said, I wasn't really planning on having an episode this weekend, so I had a whole bunch of other things planned around it. So it made it kind of difficult, but I know there's a few of you out there that listen religiously, and I don't want to let you guys down. And, you know, it's good to be on here talking about these legacy historical UFO crashes. But as we saw in the New Fork report, sometimes the evidence points to something more terrestrial than out of this world. So with that said, this is Manny Moonraker. I am signing out. Sayonara, muchachos. Check you later. Keep an eye out on social media for my question. And think of something good. Think of something really fascinating and interesting. I'll catch you on the flip side. Peace.